we'll do the live thing first. Like, hey everybody, welcome back to the Bigmark podcast. It's me, your host, Bigmark. If it's your first time watching, welcome. If not, welcome back. Like I always say, if you ever wanted to reach out to the podcast, hit us up on our DMs at the Bigmark Pod, at the Bigmark Podcast on our Instagram or our Twitter. If you ever wanted to donate to the podcast, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/thebigmarkpod. There's a few different ways to donate there, but again, it really just helps keep the lights on in here. So again, thank you so much. And again, thank you for all your time. Any moment that you've ever given the podcast to like a post or watch an episode or share with your friends, I always appreciate it. I always appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much for being here tonight. It's an interesting episode tonight. You know, I was kind of thinking about this one when I was editing last week's podcast about Shane Gillis. Had a really great time doing that podcast, apart from forgetting to turn the fucking camera on. So, as you can see, I didn't forget this week. Unless you're just listening. Shout out all the listeners out there. And shout out all the watchers. But again, I was editing the like little clip that I put out every week for the previous week's episode, just to kind of promote it. And I came across a line that I found in the research that I was doing for Shane Gillis, and I thought that this captured Shane's energy perfectly, and in fact, I feel like it captures mine as well. So in an interview with Andrew Limbong for All Things Considered, which is on NPR, Andrew goes on to say, Shane Gillis gives off post-Jock energy. Like someone who has played a sport in school, then had the self-awareness to realize he wasn't cut out for it and stopped, but isn't bitter about it at all. And the key word there was post-Jock. In fact, I actually searched the word as well. I didn't really find it. I didn't do a super deep dive, but something really spoke to me about that line, post-Jock. And it's funny because it's kind of like the tides have changed so much when it comes to jocks and, you know, quote unquote jocks and quote unquote nerds, and that kind of battle that has seemingly ever raged in it, you know, within the world of toxic masculinity that is. And this isn't just strictly males and male athletes. You know, this goes the same. You know, there's female jocks and there's female nerds too. You know, this is all inclusive. And it's really interesting because that line just spoke to me, and I feel like I'm one of these post jocks. So I'm coming from a place of this is I feel some type of kismet to this phrase. But again, it really opens me up to thinking about this entire idea of, you know, what it's like to now be an athlete, someone who historically was revered more or less by their peers. Now be considered as one of the oddities of life in a certain sense. You know, it's a novelty, if you will. Because again, I even was talking to my buddy G. Willie about this a couple weekends ago. You know, there's like 44,000 kids at Western, and there was 100 and something kids on the football team. So we're less than a percentage point on the student body population, and yet in our worlds, in if you asked any of us and any of the team members, football was the only thing that anyone ever cared about, even outside the sport. You know, there wasn't, it's hard. You know, I've talked about this many times with others, and it's like, if you really want to excel in sports, at least if you want to get to a level in sports that requires determination and requires, you know, a lot of sacrifice, if you will, and giving up your time and giving up your you know, comfort. You know, training is difficult. It's hard. It's painful. It takes, like I said, it takes your time. But again, it takes your effort, and it takes your perseverance, and it takes the promises and the commitment that you give to sport does give back in return usually. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of guys that fucking hang around and hang on to the dream for far too long. But usually when you put the time in, especially in the gym and training and working on your fundamentals of your craft, it usually does pay dividends when you're actually on the field. There's a lot of other things that happen there's a lot of other things that have to happen for you to also like be on the team, starting, playing on the field too, right? You know, there's personal things, there are politics involved and what have you. You have to be coachable and you have to have all these things. You know, I know a lot of guys who are infinitely skilled, but you couldn't coach them and you wouldn't want them as a teammate. And that's always difficult. Or there's guys that are phenomenal teammates and you want them on the team, but maybe they're not going to be big players. I kind of maybe considered myself that way, right? Like, don't get me wrong, I had my moments of greatness here and there, but I always loved being around the team. You know, I loved the team aspect. I always played team sports, the camaraderie, the shared pain, the shared joys, all that stuff, the counting on each other, trusting each other, doing all that stuff. These are all the things, these are all the values that you learn in sport and you can carry on into life. You know, if you want to go back pretty deep into the podcast, but my interview with Travis Kanellis, we talk a lot about how, you know, a lot of employers look for ex-athletes because they know that they're team players, they know that they're coachable, they know that they can do this. But slowly but surely, again, we're witnessing this major change that's happened, if not continuously happening, with, again, this sport versus academia. And it's kind of been seemingly an everlasting battle. Generally speaking, you know, again, I don't know, I'm not a anthropologist, or sociologist for that matter, but even just anecdotally and from watching TV and movies, athletes were revered. People loved athletes. Valedictorians were athletes. You know, there was the student athlete, especially in university and college in America, was something that was held above the rest. And it was like, wow, you can be a student and an athlete. And then again, professional athletes, the way we revere professional athletes, and high school games, you know, the whole school going to games and caring and seeing you in the hallway and high-fiving you and saying whatever. And, you know, obviously these are seemingly like good things. You know, I wasn't hoping that there was anything going to be, you know, purely just for like my own benefit, other than the fact that maybe I want some recognition and some praise and things like that. But who doesn't? But again, hearing stories from my parents where you know, the high school cheerleaders would have specific cheers for the guys on the team, but you know, based on their name. And then obviously that's fucking high school, let alone going off to university and college and stuff like that. You know, you look in the States, you see University of Michigan football team sells out an entire stadium, 100,000 people. And this is happening still to this day. But something's happening in Canada. And again, maybe, you know, all of our international listeners this might be news to you. Something has turned in Canadian culture, sport culture at least, where people just don't care about sports as much. And that goes for the athletes and the people who are watching. Like when I was in high school, which was like 2000, I think grade 9 was 2005. Yeah, 2005 to 2009. When I was in school, it seemed even when I was in grade 9, there wasn't a lot of kids in the stands, but every year it seemed like less and less kids in the stands. I played football and basketball, and a lot of parents came. Yeah, don't get me wrong, parents and the families and stuff, but like we had to have an entire charity run buyout where you have to donate $2 to a charity to get out of class to come to a game to watch us play the Cops and Cats, which was a sick game. It was the Hamilton Police and the Hamilton Tiger Cats would create a basketball team between the two of them and then play scrimmage Hamilton high schools all over Hamilton. Super fun, super cool. But that's the only time I ever played against like seemingly my entire school. And it was fun and it was awesome and it was the best and you felt so fucking motivated. And I guess the only other time that ever really happened, and it wasn't even in my own school, it was like Hamilton City semifinals where we played in Cathedral, which is a big school in Hamilton. There was a lot of kids from like all over the city there. That was fun. And then like regionals, trying to get into OFSA, the school that we were playing, their whole school happened to come out for that. And I think that was, again, this big, huge thing where it's like, hey, our schools are in the fucking playoffs. Like, again, I'm talking regular season used to be sold out. You hear Friday Night Lights, you hear about all this shit. So anyway, there's just less and less interest. I hear from my friends who are coaches right now. They have trouble getting the kids out to practice. They can't argue, like, not that you should, but like parents are just going to make decisions. Doesn't matter what you say. Like there's no more, not that there should be power, but there's no more respect as far as like what make coaches making decisions, kids not coming to practice and showing up to games thinking they're going to play. It just, I think again, it just speaks to this whole other thing that there are other seemingly, more interesting things to do, I guess, if you will, with school. And I think that's just, with like more seemingly more interesting things. Hold on. Let me rephrase this. What I think is happening right now is that kids have so many other distractions, so many other things that are seemingly way more interesting than sport, or busting your ass, or getting yelled at by a coach, or spending extra time at school where you just want to get the fuck out of there. Like there's no more pride. Like you used to want to have pride for your school, right? Like you used to want to support and, again, have pride for your school. At least I thought that was the case, right? And maybe that's not the case for everyone involved, right? Like there's a lot of student experiences in school. And there's a lot of people who are experiencing maybe a not so fun time in high school. I might be saying this, coming from, a person that had a fun time in high school. It wasn't the funnest time I ever had in my life. It was fun. It's not the best, it's not the pinnacle of my life, but I enjoyed it. I wasn't unpopular. I wasn't the most popular kid. I made a ton of friends. As far as I know, I didn't really make any enemies that if I saw them today, they would spit in my face or want to fight me. Who knows? Maybe I did. But anyone I remember from school, I liked them. And I felt like I got along with a lot of people. Now, that's maybe not always the best thing. You got to have some enemies sometimes, maybe. But fuck that shit. I like getting along with people. So that was my high school experience, but not everyone had that same kind of high school experience, right? So I'm talking people who maybe got bullied, maybe people who again didn't see that time that they were spending in that high school was worth any fucking extra second. They just wanted to get there, do the work, get out as soon as they can, maybe get a job right away, maybe continue in school. Regardless, didn't matter. They just wanted to get the fuck out of there because maybe there was a dickhead football player who used to stick their fucking head in a toilet or stuff them in a locker or whatever. Like, again, I don't know. I wasn't a bully. I never physically fucked with anyone. Who knows? Maybe I was a part of something that is unbeknownst to me that I didn't mean to do, and I didn't mean to cause any harm and damage. But again, these things are real, and those experiences are again, not everyone's experience is perfect. Let's just put it that way. So that being said, I believe for years, as much as all of these things were good and we were putting on all these athletes on pedestals and boasting all these macho jocks up and giving them places in government and giving them places of power, there's been a shift in that. And I think it comes from a lot of these people who didn't have quite the best experience in school. And I'm not here to cast aspersions on anyone. This is not negative. I believe that this is just the reality. I believe that some kids got fucking bullied bad, and they hate jocks. They hate anyone who ever played sports. Whether there's someone in their family, whether it's them themselves, something happened to them at the hand of an athlete, and now all athletes are bastards. They're dumb, they're idiots, just sweaty beasts that smash into each other and give themselves brain damage and waste their time. And on top of that, get all these accolades and get all these special treatment. Like, it's easier to get into schools and you get all these extracurricular pats on the back. And again, just all the social side effects of being an athlete at the time, a popular athlete at the time. You know, I was dating a girl in high school, and even to her own boyfriend of the time, she was like jealous of me because I was getting, I think 5% grace to get into my program at university. So instead of an 87, I only had to get an 82 to get into my program. Now, again, some of you listening might be like, that's unfair. And I chose to be an athlete or whatever. But yeah, I chose to be an athlete, and I also chose to go to my school, and I put time aside to represent my school, and again, put time in because of all the other values of sport, right? Like, you know, Canada's really good about that. They're not just about like, sport is all good. They look into sport really hard, and they say, look, there's values that you can learn from sport. And yeah, maybe sometimes that time might take away from your academic achievements, but it's time. You only have so much of it. And if you're dedicating it to something, even if it's sport, there are some good things that can come from it. So you should be rewarded or at least acknowledged for that time. I was at a teacher in high school, one of my high school science teachers, my high school chemistry teacher, whatever, Mr. fucking Kopchek, some shit, Croatian kid. He took me aside once after class and was like, Mark, athletes will never do as well as academics. And I was like, in my head, I didn't even know what to say. In my head, I'm thinking, what the fuck am I supposed to do with this information? Okay, sorry, sir. Literally, when he was telling me this, I had a game that afternoon for the school that he was teaching at. I was playing for their basketball team, and I was wearing like my fucking warm-up shit already. Like, I had like my high school my basketball t-shirt on and shit. Like, I was ready to go. I'm like, oh, sorry, sir. Let me just fucking rip this shit off right now. We'll burn it here. Let's light up the Bunsen. Like, what do you want me to fucking say? I'm going to give up all this time that I've been playing sport. And at the time I was playing basketball too, playing a sport that I had been playing since I was 4 fucking years old. And I'm just going to give that up because you said I'm not going to do as well as fucking academics. Fucking cool, man. Fuck you. In fact, the one thing that always went in this jock versus nerd battle, jocks always knew that nerds were going to get fucking great jobs, We always knew that they're going to be the ones that are successful, that are smart, they're going to go to university. Like, there are countless fucking high school jocks that never had a chance to go to any university that probably took out that anger on these nerds. And again, I don't use nerds as a pejorative. You know, these other people, they took out this anger, this insecurity. It all comes from anger and insecurity because they know that those smart kids are going to be more successful. Yeah, the time is you know, at the time things look a lot different. But again, you look at any classic movie, comic, whatever, you know, the nerd eventually makes millions of dollars and can buy anything they ever want. And then the high school athlete is still reliving their own fucking lives. You know, look at the Uncle Rico types, right? Like, still thinking that they can live the dream and eventually make it back one day, but they lose it. You don't have young, youthful virility and strength and power and healing factor. I don't know, you're fucking Wolverine. But you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, you don't bounce back as quick as things go on, and you just keep losing it. And then if you do want to have a family, that's going to only slow things down even more. You know, jobs, this and that, right? Like, because again, a lot of athletes spend so much time fucking playing sports. We didn't put as much time maybe behind the books, and then all of a sudden we graduate and we have a half-assed degree because we barely went to class because we were playing sports, and now all of a sudden we're doing whatever we're doing. Whereas academics seem to seemingly have a little bit more of a straight line. So, again, something has happened in the last couple decades anyway. You know, since Revenge of the Nerds, things have really taken a turn, right? Where all of a sudden the nerd and the smart guy and the person who is able to do something. Yeah, you don't get me wrong. You still have like your cliques and your dumb bimbo type mimbos, you know, goofy like they're not even jocks because they're not playing any sports. But you know, the popular kid is sometimes not always the smart kid anyway. But this is what happens: is you create this dichotomy because the other half are always like these academic smart kids. So again, something has happened where things have shifted and academia and intelligence reigns. Now, in no way do I think that that's a bad thing. I'm not saying that this is bad. It makes perfect sense. We should honor intelligence. We should celebrate intelligence. We should put intelligence on the pedestal. Fucking dumbass athletes that exist in this microcosm within the world of reality, which we have all athletes and within that world have convinced ourselves that that's the only world that exists. The rest of the world looks into that world almost with some pity sometimes. And I get it. And it's almost like I feel like it's somewhat of a Plato's allegory of the cave. You know, I've left the cave where I was in sport and all I knew was sport and that was how you were supposed to do it and the macho and the jocularity, and I've left and I've seen the world that there's so much more to it, but yet it's hard for me to go back to my brethren and tell them because they're in the world and that's all they want, and that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But like, you know, even professional sports, you know, I feel like I've seen behind the curtain, and it's super interesting because athletes are kind of the last gladiators. You know, there's something about the human experience where we want to see fucking people fight, and we want to see carnage, and we want to see physical specimens. We want to see the physical embodiment of what we think human beings can be. We want to see that in reality, because in the world of thought, we can always imagine the ideal human, but in physical reality, the only place where you can really have that time and energy and effort to put into only the physical body of a human, that only exists in sport, where you can essentially set aside intelligence and set aside psyche and set aside rational thinking. Now, don't get me wrong. A lot of athletes are extremely intelligent. I'm not saying in any way that they are unintelligent, but I'm saying you don't need to be having debates on the court. You don't need to be discussing higher thoughts. What you're doing, if you're playing basketball, you're trying to get a ball in a hoop. If you're playing football, you're trying to get the ball over the fucking line on the ground. The shit is simple. Sport inherently is simple. The task, it's the human decisions to make it harder that make it sport. Right? Like if I was playing golf, I want to take this golf ball and I want to put it in the hole. That's the easiest thing that's ever been done. I'm going to take this ball and put it in a hole. But I'm not going to use my hands. I'm going to use these weird ass clubs. I'm going to take the hole. I'm going to put it hundreds of yards away. I'm going to put trees and water and grass and hills and fucking birds all up in the way. And I'm going to give you 4 chances to make it there. If you don't, you essentially start getting penalized. So again, that's the game of golf. And we have created that to make it harder because we take a simple task and we make it hard. And that's what sport is. And it exists. And so many of those weird little unspoken, unwritten decisions and contracts have to be agreed upon when you go through, the existence of when you agree to enter the world of sport, you agree to all these weird, unspoken contracts, i.e., the contract. If we're playing the game of football, we don't have to say, okay, we're going to play by the rules of football. That's obviously unspoken. When we say we're going to play football, we're obviously going to play by the rules. And if there are any disputes about those rules, that usually creates a lot of heat because you base your play based on the idea that the other person's idea of football is the same as yours. I don't think there should be a fight. I don't think there should be a dichotomy. I think both can exist, and I think that's maybe ultimately where we're coming to, is that the jock and the nerd are starting to become one. Because I know for sure, see, this is the problem, is that I was really exposed to a bit of a different population being a university athlete. I was exposed to a lot of really, really smart cookies playing football. And the same for other sports too. A lot of other athletes that I met that played other sports, extremely smart people. So it's always tough to say, hey, this is, jocks are stupid because I saw these university athletes. But again, certain levels, depending on where you are, they might have skirted a lot of those. I know a lot of hockey players out there that have almost no education, barely a high school education, but they made it all the way to the NHL because you don't need to go through the universities to get to the NHL. Essentially, the only real route to CFL, at least in Canada, is through Canadian university football, some junior football. But still, you have to play university. You have to get into university at least, so you're not like a fucking complete idiot. But again, you see even some D1 schools in the States, they're giving away scholarships to people who don't necessarily have nearly the grades that are necessary, and then they're getting basically ushered through these university programs, and yeah, they graduate, and maybe they go on to play pros, but even if somehow they don't make it pro, or they get cut, or they get injured, now all of a sudden they have this dog shit degree, which practically means nothing, and they end up washing out. So this is the thing, right? So we need to have more understanding between all groups. But again, this idea, it's almost like a hunter-gatherer type dichotomy, right? Like that potentially is how long this whole thing has been around, right? That at one point there were dudes who were like, I'm trying to figure the flow of this water out, or I'm trying to figure out this complex issue. I don't have time to go fucking hunt. You go fucking hunt, you dumb shit. You come back, bring back the meat, and fuck you. And then all of a sudden the dude comes back, bringing back the meat. He's got all the ladies, everyone's loving him. And the Poindexter here just figured out how to divert the river for them to like get fresher water or some shit. And people are like, yay, whatever, who gives a shit? Just his buddies are giving him a high five. So it shouldn't be this way. But you're with me, right? Everyone's with me. I love y'all. I hope you get what I'm saying. Again, just my mind was completely sparked by that quote about the Post-Jock. Am I a Post-Jock? I think so. Again, I'm okay with leaving sport. I saw behind the curtain. I've left it. I acknowledge it. I finished my schooling in sports psychology. But again, I understand the struggles of what it's like to live in a world that used to love the gladiator, but now hates the gladiator. Thank y'all for listening. I love y'all. Check out our Patreon, Bigmark, at the Bigmark Podcast, at the BigmarkPod.com, Instagram, Twitter. Love y'all. Peace.